Hello and welcome to the Curator of Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Over the next 60 minutes, we will bring you some of the very best interviews and reports from the past week of coverage on Monocle Radio, with highlights from our studios here in Midori House and from around the world. This week we speak with the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and Mipim in Cannes.
We need to empower councils, the mayor, and national government to be more assertive when it comes to good plans being given the green light. Because I think we've got a responsibility to recognise the supply of homes meets the demand of people who need housing, because, that is a serious problem in certain parts of our country.
Plus, Le Magazine du Monde launches an English language edition.
Every topics can be covered on M, and what makes a good story for M, it's the ability of giving our readers a very interesting story with a very high quality of writing.
All that and much more in the next hour here on The Curator with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And this week we were on the ground in Cannes for the global urban festival Mipim, where we spoke with mayors from around the world who are looking to stoke interest in their cities. And one of them is the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan. We discuss why now is the time for investors to look to London as the city leadership and central government agrees on many issues.
It's really important to make homes that are homes, not units of housing for profit. And so the London plan sets out you had a good design, minimum space for rooms, a space for amenity, green roofs, green walls, parks and so forth. And then you have local plans where the councils work towards plans for their community that needs to be in accordance with the London plan, but respects Camden is different to Havering. Havering is different to Croydon. Croydon is different to Wandsworth. Recognises the local dynamics. That is very different to a situation where councillors, and I say this in a respectful way, I was a councillor for 12 years who sat at the planning committee, often with very small majorities, being nervous because a petition's got 200 names in, which is against a plan, not being objected to because of planning reasons, but because people quite like there being no development there. And that's where I think we need to empower councils, the mayor, and national government to be more assertive when it comes to good plans being given the green light. Because I think we've got a responsibility to recognise the supply of homes meets the demand of people who need housing, because, that is a serious problem in certain parts of our country.
Would you do away with the green belt?
No, that's stupid generalisation. I wouldn't do away with the green belt. What I would do is recognise that many of us have wrongly assumed all of the green belt is pristine. Parts of it, I'm afraid, aren't very pristine. And that's why we're having a green belt review to try and look at which parts can be built on. I'll give you an example. If there is a piece of green belt in an area where all the brownfield sites have been built on, and the green belt is not pristine, it's near to fantastic public transport, I think we should be looking at good quality, high density housing in those parts of our capital.
You talked about the transport corridors and how vital these are for unlocking land and inspiring other people to come forward and build new homes along these and in clusters around tube stations. What's the potential for those to be unrolled? So the extensions, for example. Well,
look at the history of our great city. There are 272 tube stations, and they've been built over the last 160 years. And there's a very good reason why I'm making a generalisation, but to make the point. But those in well-to-do areas have got great tube stations, right? And the property prices have been through the roof for decades. There are some parts of London which haven't got tube stations, and the property prices are less expensive. And so transport does unlock housing, but also improves quality of life. Two recent examples: the Elizabeth line, 40 stations, 10 of them in the central parts of London, others elsewhere. Those homes that were built there have really improved in quality. I remember speaking to Tony Pidgley years ago, lobbying me about when he ran Barclay Homes before he passed, lobbying for an Elizabeth line station at Woolwich. Successfully, as I said yes to him and Nick Rainsford, the MP at the time. Look at what's happened to that development in and around Woolwich. Look at the Northern Line extension near to where I live, Nine Elms and Ballis Power Station. That Ballis Power Station retail, but also the leisure and housing was unlocked because of the Northern Line extension. We're now introducing new buses across London because you can do it quicker. But if we can, extend the DLR to Thamesmead, that is north of 40,000 new homes there. Good quality homes, a great public realm, a sense of community. If we can extend the Bakerloo line south along the Old Kent Road, tens of thousands of homes there. We're consulting now on a Baker Loop express bus service to try and give confidence to developers. The West London Orbital, you've got councils now working together to invest in feasibility studies to look at the West London Orbital. And I could go on. The thing is, look, great cities don't stand still. great cities continue to move forward. Whether you're a city, whether you're a business, whether you're a football team, standing still means going backwards. And, as long as I'm there, we're not going to stand still.
Tell me about Oxford Street, because, again, one of these projects which has inspired and riled people in equal measure for years now.
Well, Oxford Street is a good example of a project that if at first you don't succeed, try again. Same with the Elizabeth line. The Elizabeth line, I remember in 2017-18, people advised me to throw in the towel. And I said no. The government, by the way, started High Speed 2 at the same time as Crossrail. We finished ours, by the way, and the government hasn't. At Oxford Street, I've been down this road before. Look, Oxford Street, when I was growing up, was a vibrant, busy, hustling, fantastic street. I used to work there in retail, in Debenhams and Barrett's. I remember going shopping there, meeting my mates outside Topshop. My daughter's shopping there, but it's tired. You've got too many poor quality shops, too many American candy stops. Nothing against Americans or American candy, but against American candy stops of poor quality. 2 boroughs borders that street, and I think if there was a development corporation, we could leverage in third-party investment, but also if you could pedestrianise that street, think about the opportunities for not just retail but leisure and culture. And so we're working with the council, working with residents, working with businesses, working with third parties to try and really regenerate that part of London. And those businesses, whether you're flagship stores or whether you're a store that wants to invest there, you deserve the very best public realm, and that's what we're going to do.
Heathrow, of course, a huge issue that comes up again and again, even probably more divisive than Oxford Street. You seem to be cautious about any extension or growth at Heathrow. Obviously, many people around the airport are also opposed to that. But when this government is pushing the pedal on growth, and especially around airports and air travel, do you think that's a battle that's going to be something where you won't find such kind of an easy conversation with central government?
Look, I'm somebody who sees the benefits of aviation to our economy. It's a really important part of our economy. And it's really important to recognise the challenges of a new runway at Heathrow, particularly in the context of Gatwick's being given the green light for a second runway subject to conditions. I suspect Luton will be given the green light to an extension. City and Stansted already have been given the green light to extension. So the first thing is, in those circumstances...
And none of those things, you weren't opposed to any of those?
No, well, there were issues with City which were addressed by the Deputy Prime Minister and the Planning Inspector, which is the only one of those in London. But the issue is, if those all have the green light for expansion, query what is the justification for expansion of Heathrow? I'm in favour of a better Heathrow, not a bigger one. Why? A number of reasons. Firstly, that area of London where Heathrow is, that conurbation is the busiest conurbation in Europe. The numbers affected by noise, by just 2 runways at Heathrow, is more than the people affected by the runways in Paris Charles de Gaulle, Amsterdam, Madrid, Munich and Frankfurt put together. So that's the problem now with 2 runways. What will happen with 3? Secondly, air quality. We've made huge progress in London since I've been mayor, the world's largest clean air zone. The air around Heathrow is still not great. That'll be made worse, not better, with a 3rd runway. Thirdly, the well-respected Independent Climate Change Committee published a report saying if aviation expands, it must address the climate change obligations, query whether Heathrow can. On top of that, actually, the busiest motorway in the country is the M25. A new runway at Heathrow requires you to tunnel the M25, reroute the M4, increase capacity of Southern Rail, increase capacity of the Piccadilly line, increase capacity of the Elizabeth line. Now, I just think, in the grand scheme of things, is that a sensible thing to do for a new runway at Heathrow Airport? And so, look, in the vast majority of things, I agree with the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. Maybe on this one, when Heathrow come up with their plans, we won't.
And now a highlight from the briefing. The UN Security Council held a closed-door meeting on Iran and its nuclear program this week. It comes after the IAEA said earlier this month that Iran had further increased its stockpile of enriched uranium. And while we don't know the results of that meeting, there has been a flurry of diplomatic activity around Iran of late. Donald Trump has urged Iran to pick up negotiations or face military actions. China and Russia will be holding their own meeting with Iran on Friday. For more on this, we spoke with Burcu Oxalik, Senior Research Fellow, Middle East Security at RUSI.
The reason the UN Security Council meeting was called, really, it comes on the heels of a recent report on Iran's nuclear activities, where the International Atomic Energy Agency found that Iran's stockpile of uranium enriched to 60% purity had risen significantly during the reporting period, risen by almost as much as 50%. And in quite stern language, this report sort of called out Iran for being the only non-nuclear weapon state to produce such a nuclear material, and said that this is of serious concern. And this was why the meeting, which will take place later today, I believe, was called.
And even if this is a closed-door meeting, clearly there's a lot of activity that is happening when it comes to Iran at the moment. Donald Trump, in the past, the U.S. has always said it will not allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. Are things really coming to a head right now?
Well, I think this year is going to be absolutely crucial. And one of the reasons is that the what's called the snapback mechanism, which the E3 countries, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, this essentially would mean that the sanctions that predate the JCPOA or the nuclear deal could be reinstated against Iran. And the deadline to be able to do this, according to the agreement, is October of this year. The snapback sanctions would include export controls, asset freezes, travel bans, and other restrictions on Iran's nuclear and missile activities. And so this decision is coming to a head now. And the Trump administration, Marco Rubio, back in January, said that the U.S. was very keen for E3 states to reinstate these sanctions and would use all diplomatic options available to make sure that that was to happen.
And could something happen, though, even sooner than that, in your opinion, particularly because we have had this letter from Donald Trump to the Iranians, which the Iranians themselves described as bullying. But one does wonder, as ever, with the Trump administration, if he's going to try and force some kind of resolution of this and maybe actually force Iran to come back to talks.
Well, this is the big question. I think that behind closed doors, there is still an appetite in the decision-making circles in the Iranian regime to see what is available. What are the options in terms of negotiating a deal with the United States? The Iranian economy is on its knees. Power shortages, chronic mismanagement of energy resources, and poor infrastructure. So a sanctions relief is very much desired by the Iranian regime. And this is an incentive to be able to sit down with the United States or an intermediary to be able to talk through options. But time appears to be running out. And the fear is, of course, on the other side, is that Iran might use this opportunity for talks that Trump seems keen on to delay, to buy time, during which it would continue to enrich uranium and dedicate its resources to weaponization research, etc. So there's a ticking clock here, and the pace of these relative ticking clocks, both from the United States perspective, Iran and Israel, seem to be working at a different pace right now.
And just quickly and finally, Burcu, what kind of backing might Russia and China be prepared to offer Iran? Because we didn't talk about them, but there will be a meeting of these three later this week as well.
That's right. This trilateral meeting that's going to be about mainly the nuclear issue, apparently, but also other issues that are of mutual interest to these three states. And this is very important because it effectively showcases Iran's ability to stand on its own, that it's not isolated diplomatically, as much as the Trump administration would like to portray it as. It has allies in China and Russia with whom Iran shares deep economic ties. So these relationships have hardened since the time of the original JCPOA. And this has changed the geopolitical dynamics around which a nuclear deal might be possible.
You are listening to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And now a highlight from my show, The Stack, about the world of print. This time we spoke with editorial director of Le Magazine du Monde, Marie-Pierre Lanelong, on their new English language edition, M International.
At the very beginning of M, it was almost 14 years ago, we were a bit, we were Le Magazine du Monde, but Le Monde, it's all about politics, about economy. It's very serious newspaper. And we were a little bit ashamed of being a glossy magazine, of speaking about food and design and fashion and travel, and about expressing what is the taste. But after all those years, we gave the proof that we are able to be as journalists as the people of the daily, to publish very long and serious and well-written stories. And after COVID, we decided that it was time for us to express our taste and to speak to the Le Monde readers about pleasure. Pleasure is good, and we need more than ever pleasure, especially in these really hard times that we all live in all the countries and especially in Europe. So we developed the Taste of M ecosystem. And what we think is that the Taste of M, it's not about telling what is good taste or bad taste. It's not that. It's about telling story about food, about design, about quality, about craftsmanship. So important, especially in these digital times. And also it's all about value, about, of course, what is beautiful, but what is authentic. It's about good products. It's about, no, we don't want to eat strawberries in winter, for example. We want to wait to taste the most beautiful strawberry coming from south of France when it's the season. It's the real luxury. And this is important. And as I always say, I don't want to be too scary to our community or our readers, but I think lifestyle is political, and especially at this time. When I look at what is happening now in the United States with the new Trump administration, when I see Mar-a-Lago, this, golden shining furniture, those faces, those orange faces with the all these, they all look the same with the plastic surgery. Okay, if I could give a definition of what is le goût de M, the taste of M, it's exactly the contrary of that.
The opposite of Mar-a-Lago, which
yes.
is ironic because the inspiration for it is Versailles and the French taste from centuries ago, or the deformation of it.
They didn't understand. They don't understand what's his French taste. And for example, here I opened the Le Monde M International, and you have this big story on a monastery made by Le Corbusier in the 50s, the architect that your community at
knows
Monocle probably know. And this monastery where some monks live offer 2 or, no, I think perhaps 5 rooms you can stay. And this is Le Goût de M. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, for me, I have never been there. But yes, I can say my dream is now to spend a weekend at Le Corbusier Monastery.
And the photographs are so lush. And one thing I wanted to ask you, we've been speaking about Le Goût de M, but more generally, the breadth, the editorial breadth that you have, not just in this issue, but in Le Magazine du Monde in general, is pretty astounding. And even the way that you decide to cover different topics. We're just speaking about this monastery with all these lush photos. You also have in the launch edition of M International a profile of Jordan Bardella, the leader or one of the leaders of the Rassemblement National Party. And it has very few photographs and a lot of text. So to you, what is the common thread? What makes for a good Le Magazine du Monde story?
Every topics can be covered by M Le Magazine du Monde because it's Le Monde. We can write on everything, even poetry, even migration, even the war, because we follow 2 Ukrainian sisters since the very first day of the Russian invasion. And yes, we speak about Rassemblement National, we speak about Jordan Bardella, who could be probably after the next presidential election, if the Rassemblement National win, which could happen actually. And of course, I mean, we see in Italy, we see in Hungary and in the United States that ultra-conservative party can win the election, and they grow. This party grow in every election. And the election in June, they were about to go to the power, and he could have been the Prime Minister of France. So, yes, that's why we wanted to write a story on him, and especially on his
his upbringing,
upbringing, because he speaks about the suburbs in which he has been
brought up.
And, he described like totally this no-go zone. You remember the no-go zone that
this famous tagline for places in France where it's unsafe to go, that these far-right parties...
about that, but it was not true, actually. We investigate where he was bought, and we investigate that. And he was in a private school, and, he was alone, and his father helped him a lot. So this is our duty to write this story. And but back to your question, I think every topics can be covered on M, and what make a good story for M, it's the ability of giving our readers a very interesting story with a very high quality of writing.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
And for the Foreign Desk Explainer this week, we'll head to the Philippines. Rodrigo Duterte, the former president of the Philippines, has been arrested and sent to The Hague, where he will face charges for crimes against humanity. Andrew Muller explains the former president's bloody war on drugs and its marked popularity with voters.
If you destroy my country, I will kill you. Make no doubt about it.
Local media saying Mr. Duterte has been seen boarding a plane in Manila. The destination of this plane is also unclear, but Sara Duterte saying that her father is going to The Hague.
What is the law and what is the crime that I committed?
During his time as President of the Philippines, 2016 to 2022, Rodrigo Duterte applied a brutally literal interpretation of the phrase war on drugs. Nobody really knows how many people who may or may not have been drug dealers or drug users were arbitrarily executed by Filipino police and shadowy paramilitaries on Duterte's watch. The official figure is 6,248. Some estimates by human rights groups run to 30,000 and beyond. Among the dead were at least 25 mayors and vice-mayors, a demonstration, depending on how you look at it, of the degree to which the drugs trade had infested Filipino public life, or of the indiscriminate nature of Duterte's efforts to combat it.
We have long documented the severe human rights impacts of the so-called war on drugs in the Philippines.
As a consequence of all of which, Duterte this week had his collar felt by the very same Filipino police he had once encouraged and licensed to dispense frontier justice. Duterte was arrested on Tuesday at Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila on a warrant issued by the International Criminal Court and very shortly afterwards bundled aboard a flight to The Hague. He is charged with crimes against humanity. He denies 1, everything, and 2, the ICC's authority in this matter.
Show to me now the legal basis for my being here.
The Philippines did indeed withdraw from the ICC on Duterte's watch in 2019. It is not unimaginable that he saw this day coming, but the indictment reckons Duterte had racked up a sufficiently convincing rap sheet prior to that date.
Rodrigo Roa Duterte!
To be clear about the circumstances of his arrest, Duterte was not at the airport attempting to flee the country. He was, in fact, returning from Hong Kong, where he had been campaigning among Filipino expats. He was seeking re-election to his pre-presidency job as mayor of Davao, the Philippines' third largest city, and was enjoying a comfortable lead in pre-election polling. Such has always been the infuriating conundrum posed by Duterte and one or two other bellicose populists elsewhere who may come to mind. The more outrageously he behaves, the better people like him.
Alam niyo, I do not know if you still believe in me.
To understand how Duterte got to where he is now, i.e. the clink pending trial, it is necessary to understand where he came from. He was literally born into politics. His father, Vicente Duterte, was mayor of Danao and later provincial governor of Davao. Rodrigo Duterte first won election as mayor of Davao in 1988. Give or take a couple of largely cosmetic stints under other titles to comply with term limits, he actually or effectively ran Davao for 28 years, only stepping aside to run for president.
When I said I'll stop criminality, I'll stop criminality. And if I have to kill you, I will kill you.
Duterte's mayoralty of Davao presented woolly sticklers for the presumption of innocence with a difficulty. When Duterte first took office, Davao was proverbial for violence, chaos and poverty. When Duterte left office, Davao was safe, orderly and prosperous. Davao's citizens were happy enough about the ends to be unbothered about the means, and it wasn't like Duterte had taken much care to disguise them. Duterte once personally confronted a tourist who had flouted Davao's ban on indoor smoking, pointed a pistol at his crotch, and invited him to choose between a bullet where no man wants one and swallowing the cigarette. The tourist chose the latter. More balefully, nobody doubted who was funding and directing the death squads roaming Davao after dark, summarily dispatching those they didn't like the look of. And nobody really cared. Duterte was enormously popular when he left City Hall. Davao's subsequent two mayors were Sara Duterte, his daughter, now Vice President of the Philippines, and present incumbent Sebastian Duterte, his son.
You know, there is no crime at all when you threaten criminals with death. In my country, at least, there is no law which says I cannot threaten criminals.
As president, Duterte ran the same playbook at national scale, combining a persona of comical coarseness with a brash contempt for civil liberties and a barely disguised program of extrajudicial violence. Testifying before an investigation late last year, Duterte admitted to commanding, while president, a squad of off-the-books hitmen he cheerfully described as gangsters. But, at least by Duterte's unforgiving assessment of such matters, it worked. Crime nationwide fell by a fifth in his first year as president, as long as you didn't count the crimes committed in bringing this reduction about, and most Filipinos didn't. When Duterte stepped down as president in 2022, it was only due to term limits. He was posting approval ratings nudging 90%. His infuriating popularity is indeed being cited by his supporters as one of the real reasons for his arrest. Filipino politics has recently been riven by a family feud between the Dutertes and another influential dynasty, the Marcoses. The Philippines' current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., usually known as Bongbong, is the son of President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., an unregenerate thug and appalling crook who tyrannized and looted the country for 2 decades before being unloaded by a genuinely heartwarming revolution in 1986.
I once knew a man who saw what little had been achieved since independence, but he got it done, sometimes with the needed support, sometimes without. So will it be with his son.
The Dutertes and the Marcoses had formed an alliance of sorts. It's why and how Sarah Duterte ended up vice president. But there has been a falling out, no less spectacular for its inevitability. In February, while campaigning on behalf of opposition candidates for the Filipino Senate, Rodrigo Duterte whimsically suggested assassinating a bunch of the incumbents with a bomb. He also alleged that President Marcos was a heroin addict. Sarah Duterte, very much her father's daughter, publicly fantasized about beheading President Marcos and claimed to have hired an assassin to do something of the sort should any suspicious mishap befall her. Marcos's allies in the Congress are presently pursuing her impeachment.
Mr. Duterte was arrested in compliance with our commitments to Interpol. Interpol asked for help, and we obliged.
President Marcos claims that there is no domestic political dimension to Rodrigo Duterte's arrest and that the Philippines was merely responding properly to an Interpol warrant, but then he would. Duterte claims to have the people on his side, and he might not be wrong. Such is the challenge posed by Duterte and his rambunctious ilk. Give people a choice between due process and a feeling of safety, even if fleeting and or illusory, and they'll generally take the latter. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
And it's been a busy week in the fashion world. Big news from Versace and Gucci this week. Let's hear more from Grace Charlton, our associate editor.
She's turning 70 this year, so I'm actually almost relieved for her. She's done so much. But this new Chief Creative Officer, which is a title that sounds like it was workshopped in a boardroom, he's sort of been thrust into the limelight. His name is Dario Vitale, and people seem pretty excited about it.
Yeah, well, tell us about Vitale. What direction will Versace take under his leadership?
Yeah, I'm not sure because he is such an unknown, but he worked at Miu Miu since 2010, so that's 15 years. In the fashion world, it's like dog years. Like, that is an incredible show of loyalty. Versace has been struggling. There were rumours that the house was going to be sold to the Prada Group. It's currently part of Capri Holdings, which is the American multinational that was founded by Michael Kors. And now it seems quite likely that a sale will happen if there's someone from Miu Miu stepping in, which is a brand from the Prada Group. I don't think it takes Sherlock Holmes to put these pieces together.
What has Donatella herself said about this and about her next move?
Well, she's still going to be involved in the brand as a sort of chief brand ambassador. She is Versace. She, is the woman that she designs for. I don't think she'll ever be able to fully ever step back. But no, I think she'll hopefully enjoy a bit of more of a retirement.
Absolutely. Now, there's also big news from Gucci. There's change afoot there too.
This news actually came as a surprise. I don't think anyone saw this coming. Everyone thought Eddie Slimane from Celine was going to go to Gucci, but they chose Demna, who is a Georgian-born designer who is currently at the helm of Balenciaga.
So what's he going to bring to the brand?
Oh, so much star power. I am a Demna apologist. I think he is the creator of our generation. He's going to define the Gen Z millennial aesthetic. I'm so excited for this. The online response hasn't been as positive. People aren't sure if he'll be able to shake it up that much at Gucci.
Why so?
Well, I think because he is very ironic, very pop in the sense that he's popular. It's for the people. He does a lot of streetwear. He's sort of disruptive. Gucci is more like fun-loving Italian, party.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of this kind of revolving musical chairs we see so often in the fashion world, what's behind that?
Well, it's always economical. I think all these brands are really struggling. There was a big downturn at the end of last year that was really well documented. The Chinese market is collapsing. I think all of these brands are under so much pressure to deliver growth, and they think that they're going to be able to achieve this by churning through the sort of executive level and the creative directors. But I'm actually not sure if they're allowing these designers to turn around the fortunes of a brand because they don't have the luxury of time. They just stay there for 2 years and then they're sort of immediately given the boot.
Yeah. Donatella Versace, of course, had the luxury of a lot of time. She really, really had years to develop her entire oeuvre, if you like. What do you think the highlights are from her years as creative director?
It's so funny because the Versace brand and look is not at all aligned with my own personal taste, but I love it so much. I love what she's done. She turned it into a lifestyle brand. They've got like Palazzo Versace in Dubai and Macau. Like they do interiors. I think also another big highlight from Donatella Versace, which everyone talks about, is that jungle foliage dress that Jennifer Lopez wore to an event in the 2000s. And that is why we have Google Images, because so many people were interested in seeing it that Google had to create. Isn't that interesting? Did you know that?
I had absolutely no idea.
Yeah, but I think what is maybe sad for Versace is how all of these iconic moments and viral is such a bad word, but the sort of really popular moments that we know from them, they haven't been happening in the last 10, 15 years, if I'm being charitable. It's all been in the 90s and the 2000s, in the, the supermodels and that look. So hopefully, you got to create new memories.
Finally, a tricky question, but one I hope you can answer.
God.
Did Donatella jump or was she pushed?
Oh, no, that's a good one. I think she jumped. She's turning 70 in May, the 2nd of May, to be precise. I would like to think that she's just happy to retire. I see her as well as just like a Karl Lagerfeld-esque figure. Like she's just so mythical. She's got amazing, one-liner quotes, and I don't think she was pushed. I hope not. It's her lifeblood. It's her work. It's her name.
And she'll stay involved, of course.
Always, yeah.
She'll be a sort of brand ambassador?
Yeah, it's sort of like a really, really big influencer. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question, how she'll be involved. I think what it actually means is that she'll show up to the Met Gala and, wearing a Versace dress and going to fabulous events. And good for her.
We're back with the curator. You sure have tasted plenty of it, but have you ever listened to your food? At Michelin-starred restaurant Burdock & Co. in Vancouver, the team's bringing another sense into the dining equation. Plugging a synthesizer into fruit and vegetables, the team transforms the produce's bioelectric charge into notes and melodies that create your dinner soundtrack for an extraordinary taste sound menu. Lucy Hislop stepped into the busy kitchen to talk with chef Andrea Carson and musician Tarun Nayar, aka Modern Biology, on how so-called plant music is letting its punters tune in to another dining dimension.
So when I go to a gig, I have an assortment of electronic odds and ends that usually include a modular synthesizer, a bunch of different guitar pedals, and effects. Really, the centerpiece is a biodata sonification unit. It's kind of where all the signals come in. And so I plug electrodes into this unit. And then from there, I'm spreading signal out to a bunch of other modules via a bunch of other cables. So it kind of looks like a spaghetti, or I think it looks mycelial, personally. And so there's control voltage and gate signals being sent from the biodata unit to a bunch of other things, and then I'm taking all of those signals and routing them through a bunch of guitar pedals into other synthesizers, sampling little bits and pieces, looping little bits and pieces. But the kind of most important part is the original impetus. If you're familiar with the idea of cybernetics and the Brian Eno / Terry Riley approach to music composition from the 70s, it's basically setting up a cybernetic system that kind of has a lot of life and movement, but the impulse is not random. The impulse is, control voltage and gate from plants or mushrooms.
With myriad buttons lighting up, Taryn's setup is hard to miss in the window of the snug Burdock & Co. space. We're hugged by reclaimed church door panelling all around, and a ceiling created of pine beetle damaged wood, as his synthesizer riffs on the ingredients from tonight's menu motif: citrus-scented rain under a snow moon. All testament to Andrea's natural style of cooking, an homage to the region's tangle of islands and coastlines, valleys and gardens.
Definitely we are in a sense of place here with the Pacific Northwest focus. That resonates most strongly in our food. Lots of long-term relationships with some of the growers that I've known for 30 years. When I started out in this industry, and also lots of new people who've come onto the scene through the years. The most appealing part for me of the dinner is that it is taking people to a new experience around food. I feel that when people come into Burdock & Co. and they have the tasting menu, it's following a narrative. We've just come out of the roots menu and now we're moving into the citrus menu. The citrus is all from Jane Squire, and her place is called The Garden on Salt Spring Island. The first time anyone has cultivated citrus here in Canada, to my knowledge, on a fairly commercial scale. We're focused on the moon, which right now is the snow moon, but spring is starting to come a little bit, so that was where the name of citrus-scented rain under a snow moon. We just want to evoke those properties of the main core ingredient of the menu and relate it back to the moon. The spring greens have not yet started. The foraged goods are still, lurking off in the horizon. And these are the things that when you have your connection to the food and you can actually see it growing, you can have a spiritual experience when you see moonlight on a radicchio. Honestly, that's where some of these motifs come from and where the naming of these things comes from. Just like when the spring is coming, there's a little bit of warmth in the air. It's definitely raining in Vancouver. It's raining on the Gulf Islands, and that warming rain is part of what is allowing the fragrance of nature to start to fill our nasal cavities again.
With some trial taste sound experiments under their belt, Andrea and Taryn know their immersive dinners will stir some highs and lows through the headphones sitting at the guests' tables.
So in the same way that I feel our menus take people on a journey and they experience potentially some ingredients and some concepts that they might not have come across before, modern biology is taking you on yet another dimension of this experience, actually plugging into the fruits and the vegetables. It's such a trip. It is so cool. We plugged into a Buddha's hand citron, and it's this massive, it was probably about 3 pounds in size. It was a huge fruit from Jane, many-fingered, bright yellow. And the music and sound that was emitted from that fruit through his sense was incredible. And it was so delightful. It honestly was a delightful experience for everybody. Tarun gave everyone 2 pieces of fruit, and he told us about the project from Charles Spence and his research, which demonstrates that if you taste something, and in our case it was a piece of apple, if you taste that piece of apple while listening to a high frequency, the apple will taste sweeter. And if you taste that same apple while listening to a lower frequency, it will taste more bitter. So we did that with a group as an experiment, and Taryn felt it was really important to show people that this was not just kind of woo-woo and that there is actual scientific basis to this. It's not a gimmick, and it's fascinating.
For Monocle, in Vancouver, I'm Lucy Hislop.
And finally, it's time for some disco. I had a pleasure this week to speak with Jean-Yves Leloup, the curator of Disco I'm Coming Out. Visitors to the exhibition at Philharmonie de Paris will find out more about the music that in the 70s dominated airwaves around the world, including, of course, in France.
As a kid, I was listening to this kind of music, and my first record was YMCF by the Village People. That was a 12-inch. I thought it was a LP, but it was a 12-inch, in fact. I was a bit surprised, but it was only like 2 tracks. So that was what a kid could listen to in 1978, and I was really into the Chase track by Giorgio Moroder from the Midnight Express soundtrack. That was one of my favorite track at the time, and it's still the same. So I was into this kind of popular music as many other popular music of the time. It can be pop or French chanson or rock. And after, during the 80s, I was more into, I would say, new wave and a bit more gothic music, and was a bit more into more Joy Division than New Order, for example. And so during this more new wave or darker period, disco was something really like out of fashion for a teenager like me. And after I went through the whole house and techno and rave revolution, I was a raver, I was a clubber. And as many other people who worked on this project, who also documented the disco years, they're all coming from the house era or the Detroit, Chicago house techno era. So, and there was a very natural connection between disco and the DJ culture of the 90s. So slowly we got back to disco through the house culture and this DJ culture from the 1990s. We heard so many, like, for example, not so many British DJs, but more like DJs from New York or Chicago. They were very often coming to DJ. I had a daily radio show on a French radio station called FG, which was the first really radio station dedicated to electronic dance music. So we had so many DJs from the New York scene or from the Chicago scene, some of the best, some of the greatest DJs. They all came when they were coming to Paris to DJ. They were coming also to our radio show. So, and they were all playing this kind of house, heavily fueled with the garage, gospel, disco feeling. So that was always been present during these years. Even if I was also into techno and into trance and also sometimes more experimental ambient music, but I would say that the lyrics, the refrains, the voices of disco have always been present during this 1990s period, during this techno house era.
I wonder if you can introduce us to the space. I've seen plenty of imagery because, like your Electro exhibition, is a very beautiful interactive exhibition as well. It's not just kind of some vinyls on the floor. So tell us a bit more, because did you want to recreate a dance floor?
Not really recreate a dance floor, but working on a kind of an immersive exhibition space with a very, you can really visit the exhibition in a really free way as you were walking in a club or in another space. Of course, the exhibition is really structured with 4 parts, with sub-parts, but you can very freely walk inside the exhibition. And because it's not totally chronological, so it's more like we have different themes, like the music and the Black culture, the political side, and the LGBT side, the discotheque era and its inventions, the dance and the body, and also the eternal comeback of the disco since 1980, which is the last part of the exhibition. So you can freely let your body flow inside the exhibition. And we have a lot of neons, for example. It can be a reproduction of old neons, like a reproduction of the Paradise Garage neon, but it can be also a neon by artists. So you have slogans, lights, and also a lot of mirror balls, which were seen by contemporary artists also. So it's full of impressions, lights, illusions. We have also on the floor a whole series of kind of, I would say, printed carpet with illusions on the floor. So the discotheque was the world of light and sound and illusion. So we wanted to have this kind of very funny, colorful environment, even if we are also an art museum, a music museum. So we really want to have a very serious content also. So the idea was to have a kind of a balance between this kind of a very joyful visit and also a very well documented series of items, texts, and objects.
And that's all we've got time for this week's edition of The Curator. The show was produced by Jack Dewars and presented by me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Join us again next week, and thank you for listening.